The storm had pressed its weight on the Alps for 3 straight days, turning the village of Saanen into a hush of white and breath. Snow feathered down like a memory that refused to end, piling on rooftops, softening the roads, swallowing the sound of everything except a hospital door that sighed every time it opened. Luca Morel walked through that door with the carefulness of a man carrying something breakable inside his chest. His scarf was stiff with frost, his gloves wet, his face unshaven. In a way that made him look older than 33. He could feel the folded paper in his pocket, the one with 4 words that should never have needed paper at all. "I love you, Clara." The lobby lights wore the pallor of winter dawn. A television murmured the weather. Someone in a corner stirred a plastic spoon in a plastic cup. The scent of disinfectant and machine-warm air clung to the walls. A nurse at the desk looked up when he approached, and because he had become a regular in the last 10 days, an orbiting moon around room 214, she only tilted her head and said, "She's resting, you can go in." He nodded, his shoulders dropping half a centimeter in gratitude, and took the corridor he could have walked blindfolded. Every step he took in those shoes had been taken for this woman. He had built her a small wood house near the lake, learned to cook fish 3 ways, paid off his father's debts, and learned to hold his anger like a match with the fire turned inward. For 7 years he had loved her thoroughly in all the ways that left no sound. He stopped at the door to room 214 and watched her through the glass. Machines blinked like tired stars. Her face, once all summer and sunlight, had thinned into a quiet map of what mattered. Her hair spilled pale on the pillow. The pulse line marched across the monitor, a patient soldier. He pressed his palm to the glass for a breath he didn't realize he was holding, then pushed the door open and stepped into the soft hiss of warmed air. And hope. "Clara," he said, and the name unfroze his mouth. Her eyes opened with the slow grace of someone coming back from far away. When she saw him, something bright moved beneath the surface of her gaze. She smiled without showing teeth. "You came through the snow." "I would come through anything," he said, and sat in the chair that had memorized his weight. He took her hand. It felt too light, the bones like small truths. He warmed her fingers between his own. "How do you feel?" "Like the mountain put me in its pocket," she whispered, "but I can still look out and see the light." He nodded and tried to smile, then looked down so she could not see the wet in his lashes. He had never been good with words. Words were untrustworthy. They promised more than they could hold. He had been raised by a father who measured love in hours at the workbench and the angle of a newly straightened cog. "You didn't say it. You kept the clock running, but clocks had endings too." She watched him. "What is in your pocket?" He touched the paper as if it were alive. "Just something I should have said sooner." She waited, her breath threading the air between them. In the corridor a cart squeaked past, and after it the corridor swallowed sound again. He could feel the words rising like a tide, and as always, a small terror wove itself through them. Fear of saying the most important thing incorrectly and ruining it. Fear that saying it would summon the end. Fear that if he spoke it, he would finally have to accept the possibility of losing what he named. "Luca," she said, her voice a winter ember. "We made a vow once, remember?" "At the lake," he said, grateful for anything that let him look sideways at the truth. "At the lake," she repeated. "You said maybe love doesn't need words. I said maybe it needs them to find its way home." He breathed out. "I remember." "Then let it go home," she whispered. He reached into his pocket. His hands shook. The paper wasn't long. How could it be? But his fingers fumbled it open as if every crease might break history. He read without looking up, his voice unsteady and real. "I love you, Clara." The room made a sound he had never heard. The quiet of a truth finally laid down. She closed her eyes for a heartbeat, and a tear climbed from the corner of one eye, cold on her skin, warm in his palm where it fell. "You said it," she breathed. "I did," he said. "I should have said it sooner. I should have painted it on the lake and set it to dry in the wind. She shook her head imperceptibly. It is here now. Love is always arriving from the only direction it knows. A nurse stepped in, checked the monitor, moved like someone trying not to wake a child. 5 minutes, she mouthed, and slipped out again, leaving behind the faint smell of lemon and latex. He leaned closer. I brought you the snow, she smiled. You always do. He told her about the village, the way the bakery's windows steamed and wrote soft clouds on the glass. The old man, who fed birds by the church no matter how deep the drifts, the boy who carved small boats and set them down the gutter rivers. As he spoke, he watched warmth return to her face, a candle inside a frosted jar. It was like naming things allowed them to keep existing a few minutes more. Before we go deeper, a gentle ask from the heart. If stories like this move you, please subscribe and hit like now. That tiny gesture keeps this work alive and lets more people find a story they need today. Thank you. Breathe in and come with me. He told her about the lake and the fisherman who still went out when the wind allowed. And then he ran out of safe distractions and was left with the present, which had a habit of looking him in the eye. Are you afraid? He asked, regretting it the moment the sound left his mouth. She considered. Not of what you think, she said. I am afraid of what remains unsaid inside the people I love. Words are little boats. They keep pieces of us from sinking. He nodded, throat tight. Then I will build many boats, he said, and she laughed the soft laugh that had made him walk across a lake cafe 7 summers ago and ask for the time, though he wore a watch. Do you remember Rougemont? She asked. The winter we were locked in the little cabin because the road closed, and you burned the toast every morning until the smoke alarm learned your name. I remember you painting the toast and calling it Study in Undertones, he said. Everything was a study. Then, she said, eyes drifting to the window to the color of the light, I thought if I painted enough snow, I would learn how to stop time. You did, he said. You stopped it for me. A pause. The monitor marked it for them. Her fingers moved in his, counting something only she could see. There is a letter for you, she said, at the house, beneath the blue bowl where we keep our keys, folded into the woven mat. I didn't want to leave you with nothing but silence. You're not leaving me? He said too quickly. Luca, she whispered, and the name carried a whole geography. Sometimes the mountain keeps what it puts in its pocket. He pressed her hand to his lips. If it tries, I will climb, he said. Promise me 2 things, she said. The first is ordinary. Keep the firewood stocked. You always let it run low when you're working. He nodded, smiling despite himself. The second is less ordinary. Don't let words die inside you anymore. Not with me, not with anyone. Even if your voice shakes, especially then. I promise, he said, and understood how little he had used that sentence in his life. The nurse came again, an apology in her eyes. We're going to adjust some things, she said. 15 minutes. He stood, kissed Clara's forehead, and stepped to the window. Outside, the snow was now errorless light, the kind that makes the world look like it was forgiven overnight. He pressed his forehead to the glass and felt the cold, like a benediction. Behind him, the ordinary symphony of a hospital unfolded, a cuff deflating, a plastic curtain sliding, shoes whispering. Then the sounds changed, became too intentional, and he turned. The doctor he trusted least and most in equal measure, a paradox born of desperation, had come in. He had kind eyes that never looked long enough at anything. He spoke to the nurse in a language that sounded like directions and not like mercy. A bag was changed. A number was increased. The room was a ship where he was forced to be a passenger. He wanted to say something. He wanted to ask if increasing the clear drip that tasted like nothing and looked like water was the same as drowning. He wanted to say that she was small now and that sometimes small things needed less. But he only stood there and listened to the monitor argue with itself. When they left, the room steadied, as if the floor had decided to stop being a boat. He sat again. Tell me about the painting, he said. The one by the window, the one you were working. On the day you fell. She looked at him like he had asked for the moon. It isn't finished, she said. What is it? A study of the way you look at me when you pretend to be practical, she said, and his chest cracked. It's the easiest thing I've ever painted because I could do it with my eyes closed. I wish I had been there, he said. You were there when it mattered, she said. When the roof leaked, when the car died on the road to Saint-Saphorin and you pushed while I laughed, when the bakery changed owners and you stood by me while I asked the new woman to keep making the apricot tarts, when the neighbor's cat disappeared and you made posters in the rain. These are not grand, he said. They are the only grandeur that lasts, she said. He thought then of all the moments his father had called work and how many of them were actually love disguised as obligation. He thought of oil on his fingers from the watch bench and of the first time he had opened a watch and seen the tiny heart of it, how it terrified him that such small teeth could carry so much time. He thought of how easy it was to break things meant to move and how he had become very careful since then. Tell me something I don't know, she said, as if she could sense him turning inward. He swallowed. I keep your scarf in the drawer by the window, the blue one. Sometimes at night I put it on and walk through the house to see what the rooms look like from your height. She smiled with her eyes closed. And the kitchen is kinder at your height, he said. The sink no longer feels like a confession. Silence, the kind that healed. Do you want to hear a secret? She asked. Always, he said. I am not brave, she said. I am only very practiced at choosing which fear sits in the front seat. What sits there now? That you will go back to living quietly, she said, and the world will miss the sound of you. He opened his mouth to answer, but footsteps interrupted, hurried ones that brought air with them. The monitor complained in a tone he had not heard all week. The nurse's face changed shape. The doctor returned with a posture that made the room smaller. The oxygen line became a river. Luca's heart started counting wrong. Sir, please, the nurse said, and he realized he had stood, had moved toward the bed without remembering it. He stepped back, but only as much as necessary, and even then, part of him remained pressed forward like a shadow. Time, which had behaved until now, misbehaved spectacularly. It stretched and snapped, making seconds into ropes. He heard his name and hers and numbers. Someone said, hold, and someone said, now, and the machine made a long, flat sound that is the opposite of a lullaby. Clara, he said, and the room heard him. They worked. They were good at working, but there are moments even work cannot repair. The long sound thinned, then thickened, then ended not like a period, but like an ellipse. The doctor lowered his hands. The nurse lowered her eyes. The air lowered itself onto Luca's shoulders. Snow pressed its palm to the window and did not move. I loved you, he said, and then corrected the tense like an oath. I love you. He placed the paper beneath her hand. He arranged the small bones of her fingers as if they were words on a page. He pressed his lips to the back of her hand and learned what winter tastes like when it is honest. When he finally left the room, the corridor did not know him. He walked past a window and saw a mountain he had climbed as a boy, and for a second he was holding his father's hand, and the rope bit his waist, and the sky was so close he could taste blue. Then he was a man again, with a house by a lake, and a letter under a blue bowl, and a promise to fill the world with boats. On the way home, the village looked like a photograph of itself. The bakery's window had stopped steaming. The old man had gone inside the church to count his saints. The boy had left his gutter rivers, their little boats shouldered into ice. Luca walked past them and up the path to the small wood house they had built with hands and apologies. The door stuck the way it always did in wet weather. He shouldered it and entered into a room that remembered. The smell of turpentine and coffee. The easel by the window with a canvas turned toward the light, a sketch of his jawline that he recognized and did not recognize at once. The blue bowl on the shelf where they dropped their keys. He stood with his coat still on and reached beneath the woven mat. His fingers found paper. He sat at the table and unfolded it. The paper warmed to his hands. He read aloud so the house could hear. "My love, if this reaches you, the snow has kept me. Don't be angry at it. It taught me to see light. There are things I couldn't say with breath that I can say with ink. You think love is safer unsaid. I used to think that too, but words are lamps. Sometimes they're the only way we see each other's faces. Promise me 2 things. That you will speak what you feel while you have a voice, and that when you hear silence afterward, you will fill it with something living, bread for a neighbor, a fixed clock, a story told to a child who needs to believe the world can be put back together. I will be where light touches snow. Find me there whenever you need to. C." He put the letter down and covered his face. Sobs arrived without the usual embarrassment. They were not visitors, but residents. When they left the room larger. He stood, wound the old wall clock that always forgot itself on cold days, and listened until its tick matched the slow, stubborn cadence of his pulse. He walked to the window, turned the canvas around, and saw it. The unfinished painting of him, not heroic and not broken, simply looking at her the way a shore looks at water. He lit the fire. He set a pot of water to boil with cinnamon because she liked the way the house smelled when it did. He took off his coat. He took off his fear. He set a chair by the window and watched the world fall in white sentences he did not yet know how to read. And when he finally spoke again, the house listened. "I will build boats," he said. "I will send them out until one finds you." Outside, the snow fell in perfect patient grammar. The snow kept falling for 3 more days after the funeral, as if the sky couldn't stop saying what he could not. The world outside his window was blank, and inside it was worse, too full of what remained. Her cup still waited by the sink. The scarf she had dropped that last morning hung on the chair. Even the small indentation on her pillow had refused to forget. Luca moved through the house like a shadow, still deciding where to belong. He woke without reason, boiled water he never drank, and lit the stove just to listen to something breathing. The air smelled of ash and turpentine. When he sat, the chair creaked like it was calling her name. On the 4th day, he opened the letter again. He had read it so many times that the edges had begun to soften, but the words refused to wear thin. "Promise me you'll fill the silence with something living." He whispered the line aloud. It sounded different every time. Sometimes an instruction, sometimes a plea. That afternoon, he went out for the first time. The village watched him quietly. They had seen men bury wives before, but something in the way he walked made them lower their eyes, like a man walking, beside someone no one else could see. At the bakery, the girl who sold bread gave him 2 loaves instead of 1. At the post office, old Madame Duval touched his sleeve and said nothing, because she knew language was brittle at first. Back home, he stood in front of her easel. The painting waited unfinished, his face turned toward her in brushstrokes of light. He touched the canvas with the back of his hand. The paint had dried, but the color still felt warm. "You said I was looking at you," he murmured. "Maybe that's all I'll ever do." He began to notice sounds again. The tick of the repaired clock, the sigh of the wind through the chimney, the faint creak of the wood when the fire died. They became his company. At night he spoke to them like they were witnesses. Sometimes, when the wind came from the east, he imagined her answer. He started writing short notes on scraps of paper. "Today I fixed the watch with the cracked glass. The birds came back early. I tried to eat soup. It still tastes like you." He kept them in a jar on the mantel. The jar filled slowly, like a heartbeat learning a new rhythm. Weeks blurred together. One morning, a knock came at the door. Sophie, the nurse, stood there in a wool coat, snow dusting her shoulders. "I'm sorry," she said, "but I found something in the hospital drawer. It has your name." She handed him a small envelope sealed with wax. The handwriting was unmistakable. He thanked her, voice trembling, and watched her leave before daring to open it. Inside, a folded page. If the mountain keeps me, don't build walls. Build windows. Let the wind bring what it must. He laughed, a sound that surprised him. You always built windows, he said, even in winter. That night, he couldn't sleep. He sat by the fire, the letter on his knees, and remembered their first meeting, summer by the lake, her painting boats that moved before she could catch their reflections. She had looked at him once and said, "You're not afraid of time, are you?" He had answered, "I fix it for a living." She'd smiled, "Then fix mine when it breaks." Now time was his patient again. He wound every clock in the house and listened until all their ticks overlapped into one long breath. The next morning he packed a bag and walked to the lake. The surface had frozen, thin but steady. He stood where they used to sit, where he had almost said it 100 times before, and whispered to the horizon, "I said it now, Clara. Can you hear me?" A sound answered, a crack in the ice, soft but clear, like a voice from below. He smiled. "I'll take that as yes." He began spending hours at the water's edge, sketching boats, carving small ones out of wood scraps from the workshop. At first, his hands shook too much. Then they remembered. He made dozens, tiny, imperfect, human. Every evening he lit a candle, placed it inside one of the boats, and set it adrift. The lake became a map of moving light. People in the village started noticing. Children gathered to watch the flickering procession. Someone asked what they were for. "For everything left unsaid," he replied. Before long, the mayor invited him to repair the old tower clock that had stopped years ago. He accepted. Climbing those narrow steps felt like breathing uphill through memory. Inside the clockroom, dust shimmered in sunlight like slow snow. He cleaned the gears, oiled the pivots, adjusted the pendulum. When it finally began to move again, the sound echoed through the town like a pulse returning to a body. He stood at the window, looking down at the lake dotted with his floating candles. For the first time since she died, he didn't feel smaller than the world. He felt part of it. Before we continue, if you've ever felt the weight of silence after losing someone, and if stories like this remind you that love can still move through that silence, please support this channel. Your like, your comment, your subscription keep these stories alive and help them find hearts that need them. Thank you for staying with me. One evening, as spring began to push the snow from the ground, a letter arrived without a sender. Inside was a small pressed flower and a single line in her handwriting. "The mountain only keeps what we refuse to climb." He didn't know who had sent it. Maybe Sophie, maybe the wind, but it changed something. He took out a map and traced a line to Montreux, the last place they had spoken of visiting. He packed her notebook, his tools, and the jar of notes. As he locked the door, he looked once more at the painting by the window. "Watch over the house," he told her. "I'll be back when I understand what you meant by filling silence with life." He walked away, while the clocks ticked behind him, steady and forgiving. The train to Montreux wound through valleys still half asleep under snow. He watched villages drift past, chimneys breathing, children waving at nothing, the slow courage of normal life continuing. When he reached the station, the air smelled of thawing, earth and lake water. At a small inn by the shore, he asked for a room facing the water. That night he dreamed of her again, not sick, not pale, but painting. She turned, smiled, and said, "You're late, but you made it." He woke with the kind of ache that no longer wanted to kill him, only to guide him. He opened her notebook and found the sketch of an unfamiliar building, labeled simply Maison des Enfants. He searched the town for it, asking strangers until one woman pointed uphill. "The children's home?" she said. "Yes, just beyond the pine line." He followed the path. The wind smelled of wildflowers waking up. At the top, he saw it, a stone house with a garden full of laughter. Children ran among the trees, chasing each other through light. He stopped at the gate, heart beating as if it recognized the place before he did. A woman approached, smiling. "Mr. Morell, we've been expecting you." He blinked. "Expecting me?" She nodded. "Clara wrote to us months ago. She said one day you would come." The woman at the gate had kind eyes, the kind that had learned to see through sorrow without looking away from it. She wore a wool cardigan the color of dusted lavender, and her hands were warm despite the mountain chill. "Come in, Mr. Morell," she said softly. "Clara told us you'd be shy at first." Her voice nearly broke him. He followed her through the gate, where children ran among the apple trees, their laughter high and wild in the cool air. The garden smelled of sap, wet, soil, and bread baking somewhere nearby. A bell rang from inside, and several small feet thundered toward the sound. "This was her place?" he asked, unsure of his voice. "She helped us keep it alive," the woman said. "She sold her paintings quietly, sent what she could. Every spring she'd come and bring new brushes for the children. They adored her." Luca's eyes stung. "She never told me. She said it wasn't about telling. It was about doing." Inside, the walls were painted in colors. The world had forgotten. Light yellows, sea green, sky blue. On one wall hung a mural of the lake. Even from across the room, he recognized the strokes. Clara's hand, unmistakable, alive in pigment and patience. "She finished that the last time she came," the woman said. "She said she wanted them to remember that water never stops moving." He stepped closer, his breath trembling. "She painted this when?" 2 weeks before she collapsed. He pressed his fingers to his lips, hiding a sound that might have been a sob. "She knew." "Yes," the woman said. "She knew." He turned toward the window. Beyond the glass, children gathered around a wooden table, painting with fierce concentration. One of them, a girl with hair like spilled sunlight, looked up and smiled at him as if she had known him her whole life. "Would you like to see something?" the woman asked. She led him into a small room lined with shelves of brushes, crayons, and sketchbooks. She reached up and pulled down a small box tied with a ribbon. "She left this for you." His name was written across the lid in her handwriting. He opened it slowly. Inside lay a dozen small watercolor paintings, each of them scenes he recognized. Their house by the lake, his workshop, the bakery window, the snow falling outside the hospital. But one painting was different. It showed a man and a child repairing a clock together, light spilling across their faces. On the back, in faint pencil, it read, "For what comes next." He looked up. Did she ever say what that meant? The woman smiled. "No, but she told the children that every broken clock can learn to keep time again if you teach it gently enough." He swallowed hard. "That sounds like her. Would you like to stay for lunch?" she asked. He hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, please." The dining hall was full of noise, chairs scraping, soup bowls clinking, children whispering secrets that sounded like songs. He sat among them, the air thick with laughter and soup steam. Across the table, a boy, no older than 7, looked at him curiously. "You're the clock man," the boy said. Luca blinked. "Am I? That's what Clara called you. The man who fixes time." He smiled faintly. "Then yes, I suppose I am." The boy nodded solemnly. "Time breaks here a lot. The big clock upstairs stopped again yesterday. Maybe we can fix it together," Luca said. The boy's face lit up. "Really? Really?" After lunch, the woman led him upstairs to a room filled with boxes of donated books and toys. Against the far wall stood an old grandfather clock, silent and leaning slightly to one side. Its glass front was cracked, its pendulum hung crooked. Luca set down his bag, rolled up his sleeves and opened the door. The familiar smell of dust and metal greeted him like an old friend. "It's been waiting a long time," he said. He began to work, tightening, cleaning, coaxing life back into the heart of it. The boy watched every movement, eyes wide, holding his breath whenever a spring clicked into place. "What? Makes it tick again?" the boy asked. "Listening," Luca said. "You listen until it tells you where it hurts." The boy tilted his head. Do people work the same? Luca smiled sadly. Yes, but they take longer. When he finally pulled the pendulum back and let it swing, the first tick filled the room like a heartbeat. The boy jumped, clapping his hands. It's alive again! Luca laughed for the first time in months, an unguarded sound, round and human. Yes, it's alive again. The woman in the doorway wiped a tear from her cheek. She said you'd know what to do, she murmured. He stayed until evening. When he stepped outside, the air smelled of rain and pine. The children waved from the windows. Good night, clockman, he waved back. Good night. That night, he sat by the lake near the inn and lit one of his small boats. He watched it drift across the dark water, flame trembling. You built this, he whispered to her. You built all of this while I was busy counting hours. The boat reached the middle of the lake and went out, leaving only smoke. The next morning, he returned to the children's home. The woman met him at the gate, holding a small envelope. Another one, she said. It came years ago, but she asked us to wait until you arrived. He opened it carefully. My dearest clockman, if you are reading this, you've found where I left the rest of my heart. You once told me fixing things gave you peace. I believed you. That's why I left you a place that still needs mending. Stay a while. Teach them what you taught me, that patience is another name for love. And when you hear laughter again, don't look up to the sky to find me. I'll be there already, in every sound that refuses to end. He pressed the letter to his chest, eyes closed. Around him, children's laughter rose like wind through trees. He stayed. Days became weeks. He repaired clocks, mended toys, and taught the children how to build small boats. Every evening they carried the boats to the edge of the garden pond and set them afloat, little lights reflecting in their eyes. One afternoon, the same little girl who had smiled at him on his first day brought him a crayon drawing. It showed a man and a woman standing under snow, surrounded by tiny paper boats. She said to give you this, the girl said. Luca knelt down. Who said? She did, the girl replied simply, pointing upward. Clara, she told me in a dream that you needed a new painting. He took the drawing with trembling hands. Thank you, he whispered. The girl smiled. She said you'd understand. He did. That night, as the moon rose over Montreux, he wrote in Clara's notebook for the first time. You were right. Love doesn't stop. It changes shape. Today, I saw it with my own eyes. He placed the notebook on the windowsill where the light could find it. For the first time, sleep came easily. The next morning, the lake was still. Mist hovered over the water like a secret unwilling to rise. Lucas sat on the balcony. Clara's notebook open on his lap. He traced her handwriting with his thumb. Each letter, each curve, a part of her he could still touch. He didn't notice the woman standing by the gate until she spoke. Excuse me, are you the one who used to come here with the violin? He looked up. She was older, gentle eyes, a scarf with tiny blue flowers. He nodded. I live across the street, she said softly. I used to hear you two play. She loved that song. He smiled faintly. She made me promise I'd finish it one day. The woman hesitated, then handed him a small envelope. She left this at the hospital, said it was for the man who never said goodbye. His breath caught. Inside, a folded paper. Clara's handwriting again. If you're reading this, it means you're still listening. Don't let silence become your home. Music doesn't end. It waits. Tears blurred the words. Lucas pressed the note against his chest. That afternoon, he walked down to the pier. The same pier where he'd played his violin while she danced barefoot, laughing like the wind. He unpacked the old case, the one that had been closed for months. The strings were dusty, the bow stiff. He took a deep breath, raised it, and began to play. The first notes trembled, uncertain. Then the melody found its way through him, raw, cracked, honest. People stopped to listen. Some closed their eyes. A child pointed and whispered to her mother, "He's crying through the music." He was. When the last note faded, the lake seemed to breathe again. A single feather drifted down, landing beside his feet. He smiled. "You never left, did you?" he murmured. As he turned to go, a young filmmaker who had been recording from afar approached. "That was incredible," she said. "I'm making a short film about love and loss. Could I use your performance?" Lucas hesitated, then nodded. It wasn't for fame. It was for her. But maybe she'd want others to hear it too. She smiled. "Then she will." That night, for the first time since Clara's death, he dreamed of her, not in pain, not leaving, but standing in sunlight, holding out her hand. "You kept your promise," she whispered. He reached for her, but before he could touch her, she vanished into light. When he woke, the notebook was on his chest, open, the page blank, except for a tiny pressed flower that hadn't been there before. He laughed softly through tears. "You always find a way." Days turned into weeks. Lucas began teaching music again, this time to children who had lost someone. He told them that every note they played was a bridge to someone listening on the other side. One afternoon, as the class ended, a little boy with golden hair stayed behind. "Sir," he said, shyly holding up a crumpled drawing, "I drew her." It was Clara, smiling, surrounded by stars. Lucas smiled. "You did. Do you think she can see us?" the boy asked. Lucas looked toward the sunlight filtering through the window. "I think she never stopped." He watched the children leave, feeling something new rise inside him, something warm, like forgiveness. Before we go deeper into what happened next, let me ask you something from the heart. If stories like this one remind you that love never truly dies, that it just changes form, please take a moment now to subscribe to the channel and leave your like. It helps us keep sharing these human moments that make us feel less alone in this world. Thank you, from the bottom of my heart. Now, back to the story. 3 months later, the short film went viral. The title, "The Man Who Played for Someone the World Couldn't See." It reached millions. People from every country wrote comments like, "This music healed something I didn't know was broken. I lost my husband last year. I felt her there too. Whoever this man is, thank you." Lucas refused interviews. He didn't want fame, but one evening he received a message that stopped him cold. It was from Clara's sister, Anna. "Lucas, I saw the film. You gave her the ending she always dreamed of. There's something I think you should have." A week later, Anna arrived in Montreux with a small wooden box. Inside, Clara's engagement ring. Lucas stared, stunned. "She never told me." "She planned to." That night, the one before the accident, she said she was finally ready to say yes, if you were still there in the morning. He couldn't speak. The silence between them said everything. Anna squeezed his hand. "She loved you more than you'll ever understand." After she left, Lucas walked back to the lake. The sunset painted the water gold. He slipped the ring onto a ribbon and tied it to the violin's neck. Then he played again, slow, infinite. He imagined Clara listening, her laughter carried by the wind, and in that moment, he understood what her note meant. Music doesn't end, it waits. From then on, every concert he gave began the same way. He would step to the microphone and whisper, "This is for Clara." Years passed. His hair turned silver. His name became known in every hall from Zurich to Vienna. Yet, no matter how many applauses he received, he always left one chair empty in the front row. For her. One rainy night, after a performance, he returned to his dressing room and found a letter. No name, no address, just a line written in familiar handwriting. "It's almost time to come home." He froze. His hands trembled like the first day he met her. Then he smiled, quietly. That night, he didn't set an alarm. He opened the window to let the sound of rain fill the room, placed the violin beside the bed, and closed his eyes. The next morning, the sun rose over the lake, soft and golden. The stage manager found him there, peaceful, a faint smile on his lips, the violin still resting by his hand. The newspaper the following day read, the violinist who played until the end. At his funeral, children from his music school played his melody, and when they reached the final note, a gust of wind swept through the church, flipping open Clara's old notebook on the altar. On the last page, written in new ink that no one could explain, were 5 simple words. Finally, I heard you too. Outside, the bells rang across Montreux. The lake shimmered as if alive. And for those who believed in things unseen, it felt like 2 souls were finally dancing again, somewhere far beyond time. Before we close this story, if it touched something inside you, if it reminded you of someone you still carry in your heart, please subscribe, leave a like, and share this video with someone who needs a quiet reminder that love never ends. Every view helps keep these stories alive. Thank you for being here, for listening with your heart. Years passed. Seasons kept folding into one another like pages of a book no one wanted to close. Montreux changed, but some things stayed the same. The lake still shimmered at dawn, and music still lingered in the air around the old concert hall. One afternoon, a girl named Elena, barely 17, wandered into that same hall. Her school had closed early, and the janitor, who knew her dream of becoming a musician, had let her stay. Elena had been raised in an orphanage nearby. She never met her parents, but she carried a secret wish, to learn who she was through music. She swept the floors there every evening, just to be near the sound of rehearsals. That day, while cleaning backstage, she stumbled upon an old violin case covered in dust. Its leather was cracked, its handle worn. A small ribbon hung from it, faded blue, with a ring tied to it. Inside, the violin slept in silence, but something about it felt alive. She touched the wood gently. For a second, she swore it vibrated. There was a folded paper tucked beneath the velvet lining. The ink had faded, but one line was still clear. For whoever finds this, play it with truth. She smiled softly. I don't know how to play, she whispered, but I can try. That night, she brought the violin to her tiny room. The bow was frayed, the strings dull, yet when she drew it across, the sound filled the space like a heartbeat awakening. She played a few uneven notes, laughing at herself, but then something strange happened. The melody began to lead her. It was as if the violin remembered a song she had never heard. Slowly, the same melody Lucas had played for Clara began to emerge. It came through her fingertips like light through cracks. Tears filled her eyes. Who were you? She whispered to the instrument. Over the next weeks, she practiced every night after her shift. The janitor listened through the door, amazed. One evening, he entered quietly and said, You know whose violin that was, right? She shook her head. He smiled. Lucas Morel. They called him the violinist of Montreux. He played for someone he loved until the very end. Elena froze. Then, this song, he nodded. It's hers, the one he wrote for her. From that night on, she felt like she wasn't playing alone anymore. The sound carried something ancient and tender. Sometimes, she thought, she heard another violin in the distance, echoing her notes. Months later, a local foundation organized a youth music contest. Elena almost didn't sign up. She didn't even own proper shoes. But the janitor insisted. He'd want you to play that song, he told her. When her turn came, she stepped on stage with trembling hands. The audience whispered. She was the youngest there, dressed simply, barefoot like Clara once had been. She closed her eyes and began to play. The melody rose from her heart, pure and haunting. Every note shimmered through the hall like a voice from another world. People stopped breathing. Some cried without knowing why. When the last note faded, silence filled the room. Then, thunderous applause. But Elena didn't hear it. She was staring toward the front row. An empty chair sat there, illuminated by a single beam of light. And for a heartbeat, she saw them, Lucas and Clara, sitting side by side, smiling. She smiled back, tears streaming down her cheeks. After the Concert, a reporter approached her. "That song, it's not in any archive. Where did you learn it?" She looked at the violin, then at the sky. "Someone taught me from the other side of silence." Her performance spread online, reaching millions within days. People called her the girl who played the language of ghosts. But Elena never sought fame. She kept teaching children in the same orphanage she'd grown up in, telling them stories about love that never ends, and melodies that live forever. Years later, when she was asked to perform in Vienna, she placed the old violin on a stand and whispered before playing, "This one's for them." And as her bow touched the strings, the lights flickered, just like the night Lucas first played by the lake. Some say the wind carried two voices that evening, one of laughter, one of a soft violin humming in harmony. Maybe it was just imagination, or maybe love had learned to travel through music, because love never dies. It just finds new hands to hold. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to the channel and leave a like. Every small gesture helps these stories continue to reach someone who might need them tonight. Thank you for staying until the end and for keeping love alive through listening. 10 years later, the lake looked exactly the same. Silver at dawn, blue at noon, fire at dusk. Montreux remembered everything. People said the wind still carried a violin if you listened from the old pier. Elena, now 27, returned to the concert hall where it had all begun. Her name filled posters from Zurich to Paris, but she still arrived early, alone, carrying the same weathered case with the faded blue ribbon at the handle. The ring tied to it had darkened with time, a circle of light turned bronze by the years. Tonight would be different. The hall had invited her to perform a commemorative recital, The Music That Waits. They'd placed an empty chair in the front row, as always, a single beam, resting over it like a hand. Backstage, the janitor, older, slower, but with the same kind eyes, handed her a small parcel wrapped in brown paper. "This came for you this morning," he said. "No return address, the handwriting, I've seen it somewhere." Elena turned the parcel in her hands. The string had been tied with care. Inside lay a notebook with a linen cover, its edges softened, its pages filled with careful handwriting. On the first page, a name she'd never expected to see. Clara. Her heart stumbled. The ink was a dance of curves and quiet strength. Between those pages were notes, lists of places by the lake, dates, fragments of melody lines. And on the last page, a line written as if meant for her, "For the next hands that will carry what we could not finish. If you can, find what the water kept." Elena lifted her gaze, dazed. "Where did this come from?" The janitor shrugged. "A young woman left it with the box office. Said it belonged to the music, not to her." He paused. "She had a scar on her wrist, a tiny star. I remember a child with that same mark years ago. She used to stand at the door when you first played here, always drawing." A face flashed through Elena's memory. A small girl with wide eyes and a timid smile, slipping a drawing into a grieving man's hand on a morning of mist. The girl who had said, "She said you'd understand." Eleanor pressed her palm to the notebook. The page crackled softly, as if waking. Between two sheets of paper, something thin clicked. Against her finger, she pulled out a delicate key, old brass, its head shaped like a treble clef. There was a number etched onto it, 17. The stage manager poked his head in. 5 minutes, mademoiselle. Are you ready?" "Almost," Elena replied. "One question. Do we still have access to the old rehearsal lockers?" He frowned. "The basement ones. Most are empty." "Why? Do we have a locker 17? He blinked, then nodded. "We do. No one's used it in years." Elena slipped the key into her pocket, closed the case, and stepped toward the light. When she took the stage, the applause rose in waves. She bowed and placed the old violin under her chin. The first piece was a classic she had played 1,000 times, but the hall heard something else. A conversation between centuries, a reminder that every note is a hand reaching for another. Then she paused. You could feel the stillness travel seat by seat, like a hush crossing a field at night. "There's a peace," she said softly, "that never belonged to any archive. It was written here by this lake, by a man who believed love doesn't end. It waits." She glanced at the empty chair. "This one is not mine. I'm only the road it walks." She began to play the melody Lucas had once lifted to the sky for Clara. It had grown with her, deeper, quieter, truer. Somewhere between the second and third phrase, the sound in the hall changed. People later swore they heard two violins where there was only one. Others said they felt a breeze cross their faces. Though the doors were closed, a few covered their mouths and cried without knowing why. When the last note drifted upward, it didn't die. It settled over the empty chair like a shawl, then disappeared, as if someone standing there had risen to leave. After the ovation, Elena returned backstage and, without removing her gown, found the stairs that led down to the basement. The light flickered. Dust lay over everything, like a quiet snowfall. Locker 17 waited in the corner, a small iron door set into the wall. The key turned with a reluctant click. Inside, a wooden box rested on a shelf wrapped in an old program from decades ago. A feather lay atop it, white, barely there, as if it might take flight if she breathed too hard. She lifted the box. A ribbon crossed its lid. Something inside chimed gently, like glass whispering to glass. Eleanor opened it and found a stack of letters tied in twine. The topmost envelope read, "To the one who will play it, true." Her throat tightened. She slid the letter out. "If you find this, it means the music kept its promise. There will come a day when these notes must belong to the world, not to me. In this box, you'll also find a draft. The last movement I never finished. It needs hands that know how to listen. If yours do, complete it. Take it to the lake. Play it at sunset. If she hears it, she will come." It was signed, Lucas. Beneath the letters lay sheets of staff paper, dense with graphite, erased and redrawn, a map of a heart learning to speak. The final page ended mid-measure, a breath held just before the answer. Elena looked up. The basement hummed with the electricity of old stories. She set the pages on a metal table and took out a pencil. The shape of the missing phrase arrived not from thought, but from recognition. The way a shoreline meets a wave that has crossed an ocean for years to land in the exact place it always meant to arrive. She completed the line, and then another. It felt as if her hand belonged to a larger hand guiding softly from just behind her shoulder. When she stopped, the silence felt full. She carried the draft upstairs, returned to the empty hall, and sat on the edge of the stage. Through the open doors, the lake caught the last light. Sunset was beginning, gold seeping into blue, a boundary melting. Elena crossed to the pier where the city first met her playing years ago. People strolled. The evening smelled of rain and stone. She tucked the pages into the case, tightened the bow, and set the violin at her jaw. The first note moved across the water. The second gathered it. With the third, the horizon seemed to lean closer. Children paused on scooters. A woman stopped her phone mid-call. An old man took off his hat and held it to his chest. The world listened. She reached the new movement, the one Lucas had asked someone to finish. As she played, something changed in the light itself. It deepened, then softened, as if the day had decided to stay a little longer. A whisper crossed. "The pier." No voice, only recognition. In the reflection on the water, two figures formed beside Elena's own. A man, silver at the temples with a violin at rest in his hands, and a woman whose hair moved like the lake's surface, eyes bright with the kind of joy that hurts a little. Elena did not turn. She played for them. When she arrived at the penultimate measure, a breeze lifted the pages, and for a heartbeat she thought she would lose them. But the last bar remained, pressed by an invisible palm. She placed the bow, drew the final phrase, and let it land like a prayer said once and for all. Silence. Then the smallest sound, a ring tapping lightly against wood. Elena lowered the violin and looked down. The old ribbon at the neck had loosened. The ring that had traveled across years fell into her palm like a decision fulfilled. She closed her fingers around it and finally turned toward the water. The reflection held all three of them, not fading, not insisting, simply sharing the same space for as long as a breath could hold. "Thank you," Elena whispered, "for waiting." The figures thinned, brightened, and became the sky. News of the pier performance ran through the town by morning, not as an article, but as a rumor you tell with both hands. People came to leave small things near the railing, a feather, a pressed flower, a folded note that said, "I heard you." Someone placed a notebook with blank pages, as if confident that new words would find them. Elena gave the score to the conservatory with a single condition. The piece would be performed each year at sunset on the first day of spring, free for anyone who needed to remember someone. She created a scholarship in Clara's name for children who thought music belonged to doors they could never open. The first recipient was a quiet boy who drew stars in the margins of his homework and listened harder than he spoke. On the night of his debut, he stood trembling in the wings, and Elena bent to his height, pressed the ring into his palm and said, "It's only a circle. It means what you make it mean." The boy stepped into the light and began to play. Somewhere between the second and third phrase, he smiled, without knowing why. Years rolled forward the way they always do. Elena married late, to someone who didn't try to hold the music, but walked beside it. They had a daughter with hair like river water, who learned to sleep only when someone played the melody at the softest possible volume. On summer mornings, they picnicked by the pier. Sometimes a feather would land in their basket, and the child would clap, as if it were a magic trick she'd been expecting all along. On the anniversary of Lucas's first lake performance, Elena returned alone at dawn. The town hadn't woken yet. She set the violin on the railing and opened Clara's notebook to the last page. The line there had grown pale, the ink lifted by time, but the shape of the words still held. "Find what the water kept." Elena knelt and reached. Between the stones of the pier, her fingers brushed something smooth, cold, certain. She drew out a small glass vial, weathered and clouded. Inside, a sliver of paper and a pressed forget-me-not lay side by side, like two notes sharing the same bar. She eased the cork loose and unfolded the paper with both hands. Only 4 words, wrote in a hand she knew by heart now. "I love you too." The words were not dated. They didn't need to be. Elena looked up. The first light of the day pushed across the lake, and for a moment, the water became a mirror so perfect it seemed like another world, standing exactly where this one stood, thin as a breath away. She placed the vial back where she'd found it, and let the lake keep its secret for the next hands, the next hearts. When she lifted the violin, a gull traced the shoreline, then circled once and vanished into the pale. Elena smiled and played the melody one more time, not for an audience, not for a legend, not even for the past. She played for the space between moments where everything is present at once, the beginning, the end, the promise that both are doors to the same room. If anyone had been close enough to hear what she whispered after the last note, they would have only caught 2 words carried away by a gentle wind. "Welcome home."